this bill landed in front of us, Minister, last week, and we were asked to facilitate its passage through all stages prior to the recess in order to protect workers' defined benefit pension schemes. I thought I was kind of on another planet going, my God, something that we can wholeheartedly and enthusiastically support the government in. And then, of course, I woke up and all of the provisions in the bill that were really good and really welcome are gone. And it sort of does give incredible clout and belief to the ideas that the big employers and so on nobbled you, maybe nobbled the committee, and despite what people have said to assure me otherwise, it hasn't left a good taste, and more importantly, it's left vulnerable workers in defined pension schemes who face a nightmare, continuing to face a nightmare, and I want to maybe talk about that a little bit. There's no doubt when you talk about pensions, people's eyes glaze over, they sort of lose the will to live, and that's something actually that the pensions industry thrives on. They love that, because no matter how boring pensions are, the fees that are paid to the pension boys continue unabated no matter what. And then sporadically, of course, we hear about the pensions time bomb that's going to explode because 70% of retirees will depend on social welfare. In other words, they get just over €200 a week for a non-contributory pension. So there's no doubt we need an urgent discussion on pensions, on the need to supplement the poverty amounts that people are going to end up on in their retirement years. But the bill before us doesn't do that, because it only concentrates on one aspect of pension provision, namely occupational defined pension schemes in the private and semi-state sectors, and that is simply not good enough. I mean, we need to look back a little bit at the history of pensions. There was a time when being in an uncoordinated occupational defined benefit scheme was really regarded as the Rolls-Royce. The worker contributed a modest percentage of their wages. The employer made up the difference to ensure that their employee, who were assumed at that time gave 40 years loyal service, got up to 2/3 of their final salary when they retired, and they could rely on the state pension as well. Well, there's no doubt about it that Rolls-Royce has been replaced by a banger that couldn't even pass its NCT, because that's been completely stood on its head. I mean, and I think the clawback or the undermining began with the introduction of coordination or integration of defined benefit alterations. In short, your benefits were reduced by the full value of the state contributory pension, which significantly and disproportionately affected lower paid workers as against those on higher salaries. What accelerated the decline, no doubt about it, and the bill doesn't address that as well. I think there's more and more defined benefit schemes being wound up or having their benefits drastically reduced or closed to new entrants. And if we look at it, the acceleration of this has really been phenomenal. It's incredible how much the landscape has changed. Since the end of 2008, there were 1,271 defined benefit schemes at the end of 2008. This year now there are 628. That's all. The amount of people in them has gone from a drop of over 150,000 people gone out of those schemes in 10 years. Absolutely incredible, and it's more probable than possible that many more are going to join them. So we need to look at why is this happening. Now, the sort of official line from the pensions industry, well, it's to do with historically low German bonds, yields, low interest rates, high cost of annuities and so on. Now, annuities are defined as the amount of pension that the retiree receives regularly throughout their retirement. And to give an example of how costly annuities have become, in less than 20 years ago it would have cost you approximately $130,000 to buy a pension of $200 a week. Today that will cost you $270,000. That's a massive 108% increase. But the lads selling the annuities, they get a 2% commission. So even for a small pension of $200 a week, the pension provider picks up a fee of $5,400 for a few hours' work. Absolutely scandalous and unregulated. Now, there's no doubt that low bond yields and interest rates and higher expensive purchase of pensions and the fact that people are living longer are all contributing factors. But they're not the only factor. And when the elephant in the room that we never officially discuss, which is causing the death, not just the terminal illness of defined pension schemes, is the funding standard. And the funding standard has put these defined benefit schemes, and it is quite simply mad. The Pension Authority work on the principle, the ridiculous principle, that all of these schemes today must have the money to pay out all pensions, active, deferred and existing pensioners today. That's the standard. Did you ever hear anything as ridiculous in your life? Let's apply it to the housing market. A couple in my constituency to go in to buy a nice house in Swords. 280,000 it's going to cost them to get this house. And the EBS turn around and say, well, that's okay now. Yeah, we could consider that now, but we have to apply the Pension Authority rules here. So in order to get your mortgage here, you're going to have to prove beyond all doubt that you can pay your monthly mortgage forever. But more importantly than that, you also need to have the 280,000 stashed away today before we can give you the loan. Now, how in God's name could that be reasonable? And that is what is causing the death of a lot of these schemes. And to add further salt to the wounds, do you know what? There's 100 defined benefit schemes that don't play by that rule, that don't have that hanging over them to collapse their scheme. Who are these pension schemes? Interestingly, one of them is the Pensions Board Staff Superannuation Scheme 1993, added to the Labour Court Members Superannuation Scheme 1971 to 1998, and of course we have the National Standards Authority of Ireland Superannuation Scheme 1996. The list goes on. There's 100 of them on it, of similar bodies. So do as I say, not as I do. Like, it's absolutely criminal. This is the reason that's closing down many of these schemes, and nothing in the bill is addressing that. 164 of the remaining defined benefit schemes are insolvent based on those stupid, ridiculous rules that are there, and that's been used to wind up schemes and erode the retirement conditions of workers. I'm not going to have time to go into it. The appalling robbery that was unleashed on the CRC pension scheme, arbitrarily, overnight, abandoned by their employer, the CRC. I have spoken many times here about the carnage in Aer Lingus and the DAA from the wind-up of the IAS scheme and the attacks on existing pensioners, deferred pensioners and members at that time, despite the assertions from the actuary that